Hi everyone, and welcome to another session at the Risk Awareness Week 2020. Today I'm joined by Sam Savage and Connor McLemore, who will share some more amazing experiences and case studies on applying stochastic risk analysis to important and highly uncertain decisions. So Sam, over to you to do a quick setup for us today and introduce Connor.
Sure. So Connor McLemore was in the Navy. He has both been to the Naval Postgraduate School as a student. That is the famous Naval Postgraduate School that I've talked about before, really the mecca of operations research. And then he returned as an instructor and ended up teaching SIP math there. In addition, he is the chair of national security applications at probabilitymanagement.org. And I want to give a little lead off on, he's going to be talking about military readiness and applying probability management in military readiness. And I want to just set the stage with the problem of readiness, which you can make horrible mistakes in this area. So this is the military readiness page at probabilitymanagement.org. And let me just kick this off by saying, suppose you have two squadrons. Squadron A has an 80% chance of accomplishing the mission. Squadron B has a 60% chance. You can see this right at the top of our page. Military readiness typically has no way of doing additive readiness. That is, what if we send both squadrons? Neither squadron is really ready for the mission, right? So if we send both squadrons, do we say not ready plus not ready equals not ready? Or do we say 80% chance plus 60% chance equals 140% chance of that can't be right. But probability management can truly create additive measures of readiness. And Connor and a third author, Sean Doheny, and I have written several articles on applying probability management to readiness. And one of these recently won the 2020 John K. Walker Jr. Award for the best paper of the year in Phalanx magazine, which is the military operations research magazine. And with that, I think I will let Connor simply take over and discuss how we've been applying this stuff in military readiness.
All right, sounds great. Thanks, Sam. So I think the first thing, so I'm going to talk about probably the ultimate failure of military readiness that had strategic consequences and why this is important and what the characteristics are of a readiness system that would benefit the military actually are. So Sam and I and a few other authors are in the process of writing a technical paper for the Military Operations Research Journal, and that's been submitted and is under review right now. But a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about today, if you're interested in knowing more of the technical details of what we're proposing, or if you have an interest in military readiness, certainly that would be the paper to look for to actually implement this sort of thing within an organization. And with that, let's discuss Eagle Claw. So as Sam said, I have a U.S. Navy background, specifically carrier aviation. So I'm a what is called a E2C naval flight officer. That's a systems operator on the carrier-based command and control aircraft in the U.S. Navy. So that's what I did for several years. And then I was fortunate enough to go to the Naval Postgraduate School. And then I was even more fortunate to get an opportunity to go back and teach within the operations research department there. So a while back, Sam and I were sort of looking for something we could apply SIP math to that would resonate with people. And at the time, I was in the Pentagon, and military readiness was an incredibly hot topic. And I think there's really two reasons for that. So first off, back in 2018, The Secretary of Defense at the time, the U.S. Secretary of Defense, was former Marine Corps General Jim Mattis, and he had mandated that all strike fighter squadrons in the U.S. Navy would achieve an 80% mission capable rate, and their mission capable rate at the time was much lower than that. So he was going to mandate that, and that would drive the military, the Navy specifically, to respond to get the readiness levels of those strike fighters much higher, above 80%. And the Navy moved mountains to make that happen, because, you know, when the Secretary of Defense mandates, you're gonna move on that sort of thing. But the question becomes, could the Navy have done it better, and were the readiness metrics the best ones? Because, as Sam said in that very simple example, if you have a squadron that has 80% readiness and you have a squadron that has 60% readiness, how do you roll up those readiness numbers? And it's not even as simple as that. The roll up is a benefit of the system, certainly, that we're proposing. But the other benefit that is critically important to military readiness is that this system works across stovepipes. So you can imagine in the Navy, certainly there's aircraft readiness levels, but there's also things like pilot readiness and things like medical readiness, and all these categories are stovepiped. Well, you can imagine that if you have a low number of pilots in a unit, even if you get the aircraft ready from a material sense, even if they're repaired and ready to fly and everything, if you don't have a pilot to fly that plane, it may not be ready. And because those readiness metrics are stovepiped, that can create missed opportunities, I'll say. So what we're proposing deals with that. This is additive. You can roll up readiness from individual squadron levels to air wings to even higher levels. And on top of that, you can combine readiness types across stovepipes. So you can combine maintainer readiness and aircraft readiness and pilot readiness and all these things that the Navy currently measures, but maybe could do a better job in integrating, I'll say. So with that, let's talk about why this is of interest to the Navy. So it's of interest because SecDef Mattis mandated that a certain readiness level would be achieved. But beyond that, this has had operational consequences. So what I'll do now is I'm going to share my screen, and let's talk about an actual mission that went an actual military mission that went really wrong due to essentially a mistake in calculating how ready the units were going to be to accomplish the mission. So with that, I will share my screen. So what I'm going to talk about is Operation Eagle Claw, and this was the attempt by the United States to rescue the hostages in Iran in 1980. So if you've seen Argo, the movie with Ben Affleck about the capture of the hostages, that is what the capture of the hostages taken from the American embassy in Tehran in 1979. This was the mission to rescue those 52 hostages. So this mission ended in disaster, but one of the things that certainly I didn't know was the mission had actually been canceled prior to the disaster, and I think this is one of the things I find most interesting about it. So the plan was this. So they were going to take 8 helicopters, and there was a requirement for 6 helicopters to be up. They were going to fly to this Desert One site where the helicopters were going to refuel. The helicopters, the 8 helicopters were filled with special forces, and you can see what the helicopters look like. There's a picture there on the right. These were MH-53s helicopters. They were actually, anyway, there's a whole backstory on that. It's more complicated than that. But these were not terribly reliable helicopters, I think is a important point. So one of the things about these helicopters was they had a mission capable rate, or for our purposes, a readiness rate of 75%, meaning if you had one of these helicopters and you sent it on a mission, it had a 75% chance of completing the mission historically. That's what they were looking at. And they knew, based on the mission requirements, that they had to have at least 6 helicopters out of the Desert One landing site. So what the military planners did was they said, well, we need 6 helicopters. They have 75% mission capable rate. So, 8 times 75% is 6. I guess we need to send 8 helicopters. And the problem with that math is that it doesn't work that way. That's classic law of averages stuff. And I think that's kind of not very intuitive. I think what trained operations research people would do is you just go to a named distribution. So there's this thing called the binomial distribution where you can apply some deterministic math and figure out the probability. But the problem is that that's not going to be realistic. You may not have access to an operations research analyst when you're talking about a highly classified mission that very few people know about. So what you need is something that's been democratized, right? And that's really, to me, that's the value of SIPMath. That's the value of this approach, is that really anybody can use it. What I'm going to show right now and what Sam's going to talk about is something that requires very little training to do very powerful things that normally required, or that have traditionally required, very, very complicated equations. And a great example of this, Sam, you can give more detail on this, but what you taught SIPMath to a middle school, right?
Right.
Middle school students. I mean, that to me shows the power of this approach. So instead of having, different equations for a normal distribution or a Weibull distribution or all these things that are scary to people, because I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you the output of a binomial distribution here, but we're just doing that using Monte Carlo simulation and very, very simple, straightforward tools.
So this one, by the way, I want to point out that this is actually even a little more complicated than they were facing, because you've got the potential of high temperature and sandstorms or whatever. Why don't you set those things to 0?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just do that.
And then we're back to that simple, dumb binomial case, and you can point out.
Here we go. So we're going to say good weather is 100%. Everything else is going to be 0. So there we go. I changed, so there's no sand, there's no high temperature, nothing like that. And now if you look up here, this is the simple case I was describing, right? So you know that the aircraft reliability is 75%. You know that you have a 100% chance of good weather, so no impacts from weather and temperature and sand and all those things that are actually probably important in the real world and actually might cause reliability to be below 75%. And what you can see here is the exact same result you'd get if you plugged these numbers into the binomial distribution. So starting with 8 helicopters, the chance of 6 or more helicopters surviving, and I'm just reading off the bottom of this list here, is in fact 68%. And then you can play with these numbers. And what you see, this is a histogram. Do we want to describe histogram, Sam, or should we just keep?
No, I think people will understand that. But just before we go any further, this is a 68% chance of success of the most important U.S. military mission since World War II. And they didn't even think about that. They just plugged in 8 and said, we will have 6. And 68%.
And if the president had been briefed that based on helicopter reliability alone, that this mission was going to have a 68% chance of success, there's no way this mission would have moved forward. And there's 2 kind of extraordinary things about that. So first off, the Holloway report, which is the report that detailed why this mission was a failure, one of its major takeaways was they should have sent more helicopters. I think they said 12 helicopters, 10 to 12, something like that. And then the other thing that's extraordinary is a few years ago, there was an interview with President Jimmy Carter, who was the president who had ordered this rescue attempt. And this was extraordinary to me. President Carter was up on stage, and one of the reporters asked him what he regretted most in his presidency, or what he wished he had done differently. And he said, I wish I had sent more helicopters because the mission would have succeeded and I would have been reelected. And that is an extraordinary statement to me for a president, a former president, to say the thing he regretted most in his whole presidency is that he wished he had sent more helicopters. That is just phenomenal to me. And that's
Right.
and that's this mission. That's what we're briefing.
Exactly.
So
but
let's
look,
talk
the histogram. I mean, look, the histogram does show beautifully the chance of having various numbers of helicopters. But the thing that Connor did to this model, which is so cool, is add these additional conditions. So you could have done this with a binomial distribution.
Yes.
Yeah. But not what's coming up. Yeah, why don't you show what you added to this model?
So let me just show you how simple, what's behind this and how simple it is. So this is just Monte Carlo simulation. So you run trials, the helicopters fail independently at 75%, and then you record whether you have a success or a failure, or in this case, you record how many helicopters you had up for each trial. And I'm not sure how many trials we're doing here, Sam. Let me just jump down. But anyway, long story short, you have this PM table tab, and I can jump down. So it looks like we're doing 10,000 trials. Yeah. We're doing 10,000 trials of a simulation. And what I'll show here is if I hit function F9, this is recalculate.
Are these with RAND or are these with the HDR?
I don't know. Let's see. I don't know. I'll have to check.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. If I change the numbers here, this is going to run another 10,000 trials of the simulation, and that PM table will repopulate. And what's happening with the PM table is all these trials, that histogram is just binned trials. So you count up the number of times you had, in this case, let's say 7 helicopters that were available. And you divide that by 10,000 trials, and that's your percentage of having 7 helicopters, and it's the exact same number you'd get if you use the deterministic binomial distribution. But the power of this approach is that if it's not a binomial distribution, it doesn't matter. So if it's a normal distribution or a non-parametric distribution or whatever, this is, you use one approach for any probability distribution, which is pretty phenomenal.
And let me point out that this is native Excel because it's just using the data table. So again, you can download it from our website. There's no software required. There are no macros, no add-ins. But what Connor did to move away from the binomial is to talk about common weather things that would affect all helicopters at once, and just show how that works.
Yeah, well, I'll do that in just a second. I do want to show the chances of more surviving. So let's say they had actually gone with the recommendations in the hallway report for 10 to 12. Let's say it was 12 helicopters that they sent. So now the number starting is 12. We still need 6. Well, now the chance of 6 or more surviving is 99%. And I think if you'd brief that to the president, that would have that might have gotten the go ahead and might have been the right number. Let's see what 10 gives us, right? And you can actually see the histogram changing up here too. So I'll draw your eye to this, and you can see the histogram moving around. As you send more helicopters, the probability of more aircraft surviving increases. And now we're at 92%. So I don't know if 10 is the right number to send, but that's something you can brief to a decision maker. And you can play with this in real time, and they can actually get a sense. I wouldn't necessarily show them the histogram, but you can certainly show them the chance of a number surviving. Let's say if instead of 6 helicopters, you only need 5, and now we're back up to 98%. So very powerful, very straightforward. So then, so like as Sam mentioned, and let me go back to the original numbers. Let me go 8 and 6. So as Sam mentioned, you can do this with the binomial distribution, but where SIMPmath becomes so powerful is when there's interdependencies. So you can imagine if you're flying, helicopters through sandstorms and at high temperatures, well, there are going to be interdependencies in the failures potentially. If you fly a helicopter through a sandstorm, maybe they not only will they fail at a higher rate, but there might be things that these named traditional probability distributions cannot handle, right? Well, we can handle that stuff using this approach. So let's go from 100% good weather, and let's start looking at the numbers for high temperature and sand, or sand only, or high temperature. And what you're going to see is, based on the weather forecast, the reliability of the helicopters may change. So in this case, let's see if we added just high temperature. So let's say there was a 50% chance of high temperature, and that dropped the reliability from 75% to 70%. And you can see that to the right of high temperature, right? Well, how does this sort of thing affect the reliability of the helicopters? Well, good luck doing this with named distributions, right? I'm not saying it can't be done, but you're gonna be working to do that sort of thing. And now let's say, instead of 50% high temperature, 50% good weather, now let's say we had a 25%, or let's bump it up. Let's say the weather just wasn't going to be good, right? Let's say now we have a 50% chance of high temperature in sand and a 50% chance of high temperature only. Well, if we have high temperature in sand, our reliability goes way down, right? And now, if we send 8 helicopters, the chance of 6 or more surviving is only 39%. And that's obviously going to be less than ideal. If we bump it up to 12, it's 85%. And that's not something that I think is intuitive, right? I wouldn't have said as a military planner, oh, if we have a weather report that there's high temperature in sand, or there's a 50% chance of high temperature, that changes our helicopter reliability. And keep in mind, we can access all this data, right? I think that's what's so powerful about it, is you can get a weather report and see what the weather's probably going to be. And you can pull reliability numbers from databases on helicopters and see, based on the weather, what the reliability is going to be. But it's combining that stuff in a simple, efficient manner that this technique provides that is so powerful. So in this case, if we send 12, we still only have an 85% chance of mission success based strictly on the reliability of the helicopters. And maybe that's enough, maybe it's not. That's something for a decision maker to decide. But at least we've given them a number that is defensible. I think a readiness number that is defensible, and that these individual helicopter readinesses have been rolled up. Because look, we have 75% for all helicopters in this case. If we had dissimilar types of helicopters or squadrons with different maintenance practices, every single helicopter could have a different maintenance level, which could have been, or a different readiness level, which could have been rolled up from individual maintenance actions, right? So you can go all the way down to a single screw here, and you can go all the way up to an entire naval air force. So
that's kind of a great segue into the air wing problem. Alex, yeah. Did you have some questions about this so far?
Well, what I want to point out to the audience watching us, and by the way, everyone, if you have questions, do write them in the comments underneath this video. But I want to really emphasize for everyone watching us that this is, you know how human mind works, and people fall into cognitive biases. This is not a helicopter problem. This is just a helicopter case study showing you how to solve many business day-to-day problems with different pieces of equipment, different machinery, different business units, different cost centers, even different personnel. I mean, you can apply exactly the same logic to different business problems. And this is what's so powerful about SIP math, and what a lovely real life example. So thank you for that, Sam and Connor.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, and speaking of personnel, I mean, that's the beauty of this next one, right? Is as you were talking about, it's stovepiped. Oh yeah, the plane has an 80% chance of flying, but will there be a pilot for it?
Yeah, so this is this is the one of the articles we wrote. Let's see, this was also in Phalanx, because we wrote another one that was in
ORMS Today.
ORMS Today, which is informs the Professional Society of Operations Research. But this is so what we're talking about here is how to roll up air wing readiness. So a carrier air wing is all the aircraft on an aircraft carrier. It's the aircraft on the deck. And So that carrier air wing has things like dissimilar types of squadrons and dissimilar types of pilots. But what is common across the air wing is that you need a certain number of planes to do certain missions. And depending on the readiness of each type of plane, it is potentially very useful to know not only what the overall readiness of the mission is, the mission readiness chance, we're calling it, but it's also useful to know what's actually, if there is a deficiency, what's actually driving that deficiency. And that isn't always clear in the current readiness metrics. And again, I would say that, this is certainly, as Alex mentioned, this is applicable across many, so readiness, many different types of businesses calculate readiness in some way. This is also broader than just readiness. So this can be used for anything where you have uncertainty. And so let's talk about the uncertainty here. So in this case, we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 types of aircraft. And some of these aircraft you have more of than others. So you have a large number of strike fighters. These are your fighter aircraft that fly off the carrier. You have these specialized strike fighters called Growlers. These are electronic warfare aircraft. You have Hawkeyes. This is what I was a naval flight officer in, but these are the command and control aircraft. You have Greyhounds, which are essentially delivery aircraft. These are actually going away. They're being replaced by B-22s, but that's just a little Navy trivia. And then you have a certain number of helicopters. And for any mission involving the carrier air wing, you're going to need some combination of these aircraft. So you have a large number of strike fighters. So let's describe what's going on here. So you have so we've calculated a mission readiness chance based on the number of aircraft that you see in these boxes up here. So the mission requirements for this is a large mission, right? It's calling for 30 strike fighters, 2 Growlers, 2 Hawkeyes, 1 Greyhound, and 10 helicopters.
And Connor, I'd say this. I think you have a total number of strike fighters of maybe 40 on the aircraft carrier. So if you put 41, if you put a requirement of 41, you should get 0, I think, for your mission.
Yeah, it might have been 44 that we used. I don't remember exactly what we used, but yeah, that's right. That's right. So strike fighters. So this is actually makes it a really simple example, right? Because what you're seeing here is we've said we need more strike fighters than we have available. Our mission readiness chance drops to 0 for this counter air defense mission because you can do this by mission type, right? So for certain missions, you might need certain aircraft. So this can calculate very straightforwardly, depending on the mission type, what your mission readiness chance is. So in this case, we can see very quickly that our chance of deficiency by type of aircraft, strike fighters, is 100%. And what's driving that? Well, 100% crew, we don't have enough crew, and we don't have enough planes. And you can imagine other types of readiness that you would want to add to this list. I mean, it's unlimited, right? But in this case, we have crew and planes. And the other thing is, you see, if you added up this readiness, it wouldn't make any sense, right? Because chance by type, well, for our strike fighters, it's 100%. For our Growlers, it's 2%, Hawkeyes 1%, Greyhounds 4%, and helicopters 2%, and that adds up to more than 100%. But the reason it adds up to more than 100% is you can have a deficiency in multiple types of aircraft. So you can have a strike fighter that's deficient. In fact, in this case, you have a 100% chance of having a strike fighter that's deficient, but you can also have a Growler that's deficient. But if you're the commander of this carrier air wing, it's incredibly useful to be able to say, I'm asking for too many strike fighters, and the odds of having the Growlers that I need to complete this mission are very, very high. So that this is useful information conveyed very quickly, and it's in an interactive dashboard that we've built in Excel that you can change these things and sort of explore and have a conversation around, which I think is different than trying to have a conversation around, say, PowerPoint. So let's go ahead and drop this down again. I don't remember what we had it at originally. Let's say it was 30. Yeah, let's say 20. Let's say we don't need too many, and see if we have because we were at 70%, right? And now if we need 10 less strike fighters, now our mission readiness chance goes up to 91%. So that's certainly better. That's in the ballpark of when you're going to get the thumbs up for a mission, right? And in this case, the chance by type, what's going to contribute to the deficiency? Well, you might only have 2 Greyhounds on your working with your aircraft carrier. So your chance of deficiency, it's all in, or not all, but a large part of it is in the Greyhounds. So let's go ahead and drop the number of Greyhounds required. Maybe Greyhounds was a
Connor, hold on a second. Let me just repeat that. We see that there is a 9% chance of not carrying off the mission. That is 100% minus 91%. There's a 9% chance we won't carry off the mission. If that happens, there's a 48% chance the Greyhounds are to blame, right?
That's right.
So you know where to point the finger in advance before it actually happens.
Yeah, and that's absolutely key, Sam. I should have mentioned that. So given that there is a mission failure, this is the chance that the type was not ready for the mission, or did not complete the mission. Yeah, that's right.
And let's also point out, you haven't hit the enter key yet. So we were asking for 1 Greyhound. You're about to hit the enter key, and then we're going to see who's at fault next, right?
Yeah, so now we now we need 0 Greyhounds. Our chance that, given that there was a failure, that the Greyhounds contributed to the failure is now 0%, because it must be. And we went up 4 percentage points, which is not bad when you're starting at 91%. That's pretty darn good. And now you can look at the next aircraft, and it's, if we have a problem, it may be the Growlers, because you only have a handful of Growlers on the aircraft carrier. And here's the other thing, it's not just about having enough pilots, right? And aircrew. Those pilots and aircrew have to be trained in the mission that you are assigning them to. And this can be very difficult to manage in real time, and that this proficiency, like proficiency in any challenging endeavor requiring skilled operators, degrades over time. So unless one person has that situational awareness to know that, the last time we practiced this mission was 4 months ago, and that's a little long. Maybe our pilots and aircrew are no longer proficient in that mission. Unless you can balance all of these things in your head, which can be very difficult, that might not jump out at you. So you may have the planes that are ready from a maintenance perspective, but you may not have the trained aircrew. So what we can do is we can go ahead and change missions from counter air defense, or this is an air defense mission, to a maritime mission, right? Which may have completely different requirements. And let's see, in this case, it looked like, let's see if we get any changes here. If we bump this up to 30 again, we might have to. Let's see if we can start getting crew failures.
Yeah.
Okay, so in this case, in fact, let's go 35. Let's really stress the strike fighters. Okay, so in this case, we have a 99% chance that, given that we don't meet that mission readiness, that it's going to be caused by strike fighters, and there's a 92% chance it's caused by not having enough planes ready, but there's a 45% chance it's caused by not having enough crew who are trained or ready in that mission set. So what we're going to do is we're going to change from maritime to counter air defense, and now our chance of deficiency is approaching 100% now, and our crew, the percentage that crew contributed to that failure increased from, what was it? I didn't see. We're at 67%. It was 40-something%.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, 45% to 67. So we're obviously less trained in this counter air defense mission than we are in the maritime mission, and that's really the beauty of this approach. And there's not a big simulation model behind this. This is just those stochastic information packets that we're referring to based on changing the boxes in Excel. It's incredibly straightforward, and you get that feedback.
Well, show them the library. So we gotta show them the SIP library tab, which I think is
absolutely. So here we go. Here's our aircraft SIP library. We also have our crew library, and what you can see, it's just more SIPs. So that SIP I showed you that was on the on Eagle Claw, that was the number of aircraft that you could expect to have available depending on how you set up the problem. It's the same thing here. So in this case, crew library is the simplest one, right? In the case of crew library, we have 40, it looks like 40 air crew or 40 sets of air crew available. And let's see, we have our two.
Can you zoom in on that? Just zoom in.
Yeah. We have our counter air and maritime, and you can see for each trial, depending on whether you're doing the counter air or maritime mission, how many crew you can anticipate having. And this is just strike fighters, right? We would have to, for every aircraft type, we would have to do 2 types of crew. We're not doing that here, just to keep the example simple and straightforward. But that would be trivial to do, right? It's all the same thing underlying this. So in this case, this is a strike fighter crew available, and you can see that that it's different depending on whether you're doing a counter air mission or a maritime mission.
And you know, a question that people are always asking is, well, where do you get the SIPs? And I'd like to share my screen for a sec, because we've been working with another NPS grad, Naval Postgraduate School grad, Phil Feringer, who is a fellow with Lockheed Martin, and he built a very nice discrete event simulation, which I'll bring up here in a sec. A very nice discrete event simulation that creates SIPs. So remember, this is cross-platform, and you don't have to be in Excel. The beauty of Excel is there are a billion users, but the SIP generation might well occur in some other environment. So this now is a Markov chain Monte Carlo as a discrete event simulation. What Phil was simulating here, and this is just make-believe numbers, but imagine a squadron of F-35 fighters, and they go through various forms of maintenance in and out, into the depot, and I don't know what all these things stand for, but you can simulate these sorts of things. So this is now going to start running the planes through these various states of maintenance, and from that, you then get this stochastic readiness, which you can load into Excel, and that becomes like a Lego block that you plug into this whole military readiness thing, where the SIPs that came out of the discrete event simulation could feed something like the Excel model that Connor was just showing you. So I think throughout this procedure, the more we've worked on this, Connor and Sean, our co-author, and Phil and I have all been struck by how really Lego blocks are the way to describe it, that we did not have this ability to aggregate stuff modularly before, right? And so I think that kind of sums up what we've been working on together. It's really exciting. We've got hopefully further publications coming out on this, and it's just been a very gratifying experience, I think, for all of us.
Excellent. So thank you very much, Connor, for the 2 case studies. Everyone who's watching us, you know what to do. Ask questions, write comments underneath this video. And Sam, do you want to bring it all together and link it to SIPMath?
Well, you know, we've had several SIPMath presentations in this, and I guess I should say that the SIPMath tools are free. That there's a free version that is very powerful. It was certainly all we needed on anything you've seen today, and I would just show you what it looks like in Excel. And the most important clarification, I think, to make here, the thing that confuses people the most, is that this is an add-in. These are macros. But the model you build with these is just a straight Excel model that can be shared with anybody. So, for example, if I initialize a little model here, I just said, let's do a little model, and it immediately added this sheet that Connor showed you. This is a sheet that is going to be driven by the internal data table function of Excel. So it's just part of Excel. Data, what if analysis, data table, right? And then I'm just going to simulate a normal distribution with a mean of 10 and a standard deviation of 2. And so I go to generate input, ask for a normal, the mean is 10, the standard deviation is 2, and oops, I'm going to put that distribution down here. And then nothing has yet appeared on the PM table, but as soon as I make that an output cell, define that as, I'll call it output, and when I do that, it will also make a spark line. Sometimes I like to make a great big spark line. And now you look over on PM table and you've got all these 1,000 trials. And if I change anything, like let's change the mean to 100, and you see the numbers go up, but there are really 1,000 numbers in there at this point. And let's go back to 10. And then the key here is that really you can determine the chance of stuff. I don't like to use the word probability distribution. You've heard me say this before. It's got 9 syllables. Who needs it? I just want to know the chance that this is less than, say, 14. And so I go over here, I click on the chance of whatever button. I say, what's the chance that that thing bears that relationship to that thing? And the answer is 97%, right? And as I tell people, I can do all this stuff in my head, but most people need a simulation, right? So anyway, we do hope you'll try downloading the free tools. They really have revolutionized the way I look at the world. I think the way Connor looks at the world, the way we should all be looking at the world. And I want to stress that the whole concept of SIP math is independent of Excel. If you go to R, for example, the native language of R is SIP math, because a SIP in R is a column of an R data frame. And in fact, the whole R data frame is what we call a SLURP, a stochastic library unit with relationships preserved. And the way we think this will ultimately be done is that R, Python, MATLAB, C++ is where the SIP libraries will be generated, and they can be used by everybody else in Excel or online or in any way they want.
Thanks, Sam. I have an interesting case study. Just today, I was sitting down with my team, and we were talking about, well, we want to communicate how uncertainty and volatility in some of our assumptions affects our business model when we communicate to the rating agencies and investors. And so for us, we were going to build a model, a stochastic model, and then the immediate question came up, well, how do we send them the stochastic model so they don't have to install the same paid Monte-Carlo modeling software? And one of the team members started saying, well, we could send them deterministic and just include some scenarios. I'm going, no, there's a better way. So we looked at each other and he goes, SIP math.
Right.
We we can generate stochastic models and then send them to anyone without any additional software installed. I mean, this is just so
Absolutely.
powerful. And
Absolutely.
create little hypotheses for the rating agencies to test. They can plug in their own assumptions.
Absolutely.
And see how the whole thing resimulates, which is
absolutely. And you can send it as an Excel file, as an XML file, as comma-separated values, as JSON. And the other thing is, there are situations where you may have a proprietary model and you don't want to give up your model, right? Yeah, but the output doesn't give up your model. You know, an analogy that I love is, if probability were beer, then the sip is the beer bottle. And, you know, people often ask me, they say, well, what kind of distribution would you use here? And I say, well, you're asking the inventor of the beer bottle how to make beer. Wait a minute. No, I use glass. That's my medium. I mean, you can actually put vinegar in a beer bottle. You just can't sell it as beer in that case. But when you buy a bottle of Pilsner Urquell, they've been making beer, I think, since 1299 or something. You can't reverse engineer the beer, right, from the beer. And you can't reverse engineer the stochastic model that created the sip either, which makes it kind of an ideal way for people with proprietary models to transmit the stochastic information.
Totally. So
Great.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for this amazing session. Audience, dear audience, ask questions to our speakers below this video, and make sure you download these sample models from the probabilitymanagement.org, because all of the models that the guys showed to you today are available for you to download and play around and just see how it looks. And then, of course, free version of SIPMath is available for download as well. And some lucky participants of the Risk Awareness Week 2020 will get a paid version of SIPMath. So amazing. Stick around, watch more workshops, and we'll see you around.
Thank you. Bye-bye.